Hello, and welcome to episode 2.11, the MidWinter edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat, the podcast that covers the arts in northern Chautauqua County, sponsored by the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. My name is Tom Laughlin, and I'm your host as we bring you news and information about arts events at the Opera House and around the region, including interviews with artists and creators across the county. I've been amazed at how I've managed to stay in good health throughout the pandemic, but alas, my luck has run out. While I've not yet had COVID, another issue cropped up over the weekend before this podcast came out, and it threw my production timeline askew. I had all the interviews complete, but lost 3 days to the illness, and had to frantically pull this episode together to meet the deadline. So forgive me if it does not seem as polished and complete as usual. I'm sure the podcast and I will be back to our usual selves, for better or worse, with the next episode. The first interview is with Dr. James Ivey, Professor Emeritus of Theater from SUNY Fredonia, who talks with me about the next stage on-screen performance from the National Theatre in London of Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. Joining me once again to talk about the upcoming National Theatre's production of Anton Chekhov's The Seagull is Dr. James Ivey. Jim is a professor emeritus of theater and dance at SUNY Fredonia. He joins us once again from his study in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Jim, welcome back to the podcast. Good to have you again.
It's great to be here. I'm happy to be a part of the podcast and to be in support of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. That was a very integral part of my life and for 19 years living in Fredonia, New York. I am grateful for that institution being a part of the culture in Western New York.
Great, thank you. We appreciate that. We'll hope to be able to live up to that high praise. All right, so we have the National Theatre in London once again, bringing us a series, and this time they're doing Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. That is a play that really put Konstantin Stanislavski, Nemirovich Danchenko, and Chekhov as the triad that really brought the Moscow Art Theater onto the map and essentially established the acting style we had come to know as realism. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background on the play, Chekhov, perhaps something about the Moscow Art Theater and its significance, and we'll go from there.
Great. Well, the Moscow Art Theater, in its legendary inception, was an organization that was searching for, I think, the right play for their company. They had performed 3 plays prior to The Seagull that were moderate successes, but had not truly given them a place in the cultural realm in Moscow until they performed this play, The Seagull. But they didn't perform the first production of The Seagull. It had been performed in St. Petersburg in 1896. It was a hastily prepared production. It was about 10 days of rehearsal, which was the standard practice at that time. And it was a disaster. The actors were ill-equipped to play these very complex characters that Chekhov was writing. It was a style that those actors were unfamiliar with, really. So it was a failure. Chekhov vowed that he didn't want it performed again. The story goes is that Stanislavski and Nemirovich Danchenko, essentially the impresario or the producer of the MAT, convinced Chekhov that they would take care of it with his play. And they went into rehearsals and invited Chekhov to observe some of those early rehearsals. He saw the careful attention that Stanislavski paid to the subtleties of the characters, the subtleties in their relationships, and he did allow the production to continue. Chekhov allowed the production to continue. And It was an overnight success in 1898 when they performed it. And the Seagull became a symbol for the Moscow Art Theater, and it was embroidered on their curtains and was a part of their symbol of their theater for decades after that. So Stanislavski was concerned with the total emotional truth of the characters. There is a production book, and I did read it when I directed the Seagull at my previous institution at Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene. I directed the Seagull, and I wanted to know what was it that Chekhov, or what was it that Stanislavski was trying to bring out of Chekhov's play. And the production book of the Seagull exists in the British Library, and it goes down to the very most minute of details in terms of action and physical action and emotional content of characters. Some of the properties that would be used, and some of his mise en scène as he was trying to bring about this first production of the play. He was really looking for his actors to completely immerse themselves in the life of the character, in the character's feelings. And so Chekhov, in writing his plays, has a very unique style. Often the characters do not say what they're feeling, but we are left with, and it's the challenge of a director and an actor working together, actors working together, to bring out the subtext of the dialogue. What is underneath the dialogue? Mm-hmm. While they may not be saying exactly what they're thinking or feeling, there is an undercurrent of intent that the director and actor must find, and that is one of the greatest challenges to all of Chekhov's plays.
Now, let me ask you. I'm not going to ask you to do a plot summary because that would take up the rest of the interview. But it's a very, very complex plot with about 3 love triangles. But to put it succinctly, I think we can talk about the plot as being, there are characters of an older generation, there's characters of younger generation, and they come into conflict both in terms of their lifestyles as well as their thinking about art, the old way of doing art as opposed to the new way of doing art. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely. It's a play about the theater, essentially. And in the first act, we see that dichotomy or paradox of the old and the new, which is exactly what Chekhov's world was going through, and all Russia in general at this time. We see the conflict between the youth and maturity. With Chekhov's characters of Madame Arkadina, who is a very successful regional actress. She is supported in her by her younger lover, Trigorin, who is a famous but middling playwright and author, short story writer. Then there's Konstantin, who is Arkadina's son, Konstantin Treplev, who is her son by her previous marriage. And he is an aspiring playwright. He wants to dispense with the old methods. And so we see Treplev, or Konstantin, and his young love interest, Nina, an aspiring actress, present a very symbolistic a play in Act 1 that is rejected by the old guard. And so just a kind of footnote again, so we see that embracing of realism and approach to realism, also another paradigm shift and a shift in style of the exacting realism of Stanislavski in conjunction with Chekhov's play. So this was a new sensation on the stage that was really a wholly different approach to the theater.
Now, one of the most interesting things that you've mentioned so far is the exacting nature of what Stanislavski and Chekhov are looking in terms of the sort of the recreation of the mise en scène for the show. The National, in its production of the Seagull, from what you and I have been able to glean from the videos, the trailers that exist, again, neither of us have seen this, but it seems the National is going like 180 degrees in the other direction. Can you just give us a little insight into what you've seen and what you think it means and what they're trying to do there?
Yes, I'll do my best, even though I have to post the disclaimer that I have not seen the production of it, but have read a number of reviews and how the Jamie Lloyd and the Jamie Lloyd Company has produced this Anya Rice's adaptation of Chekhov's play. They've taken a decidedly postmodern, if not spare and stripped down approach to the play. You will not see the attention to realistic detail that we've just been speaking about. The setting for this production is a wood chipped wall that surrounds the playing area, a stark fluorescent lighting, and a very muted color palette for the costumes that do not embrace the period in which the play was written at all. They sit in plastic office chairs that we might see in any kind of office setting today. The actors are barefoot, and there are no properties used at all. And all of the actors are mic'd so that they may be sitting 6 feet from the other actor and they can whisper into their microphone and we will hear the sound out in the theater. Now, I want to say something about that. While this production approach is somewhat radical compared to what happened in Moscow in 1898, those microphones, I think, would enhance the subtleties of the subtextual material that we've been speaking about and assist the actors in that effort to bring out the internal qualities and the internal subtleties of that subtext. I think that approach is going to be very interesting for the audience to see. And Lloyd has been known for his stripped down approaches to these plays. As also, he had a very acclaimed production of Cyrano de Bergerac that was equally as radical in its approach. It was highly respected and very well received in England by audiences. So I hope that it reaches the audiences, even though what we're going to see is quite different.
That's quite different. You know, when I saw one of the clips, my feeling was that the approach, the conceptual approach from the director was really to just get at the absolute very truth and core of the words in the play, and what they mean, how they communicate one to the other. And that was to me the most striking thing that I noticed in watching this particular section of, and so in order to facilitate that, everything else has been taken away, and all we're left with is the actors, their words, and their connection to the words, and whoever it is that they're talking to. Do you get the sense that that's what's going on?
Absolutely. And in reviews that I've read, even physical action is kept to a minimum. So while the dialogue might suggest a need for the actor to stand up and move across the stage, some of that, those impulses, I think, are intentionally suppressed by the director not to be taken, so that the focus on the word and the spoken word and the subtextual intent is very clearly focused. There's a young actress in this play that is making her stage debut, Emily
Amelia Clark.
Emilia Clarke, who is of Game of Thrones fame. So she's making her stage debut in this play. She was very well received by all accounts. And it was the part of Nina is a role that actresses have coveted through the centuries, or through the century, and 127 years of this in the history of this play. And so she's been received good notices for this. I love Chekhov. I've had connections with all four of the major plays, and I've done a lot of class projects with Chekhov as well. And he presents a challenge to any director, regardless of whether you're doing a realistic approach or something that is the exact opposite. But I'm sure the audiences are in for an interesting time in the theater.
Jim, thank you so much once again for being on the podcast and giving us a little more clarity and light into this particular production. It's always very enjoyable to talk to you about theater. And again, we've got some more shows coming up from the National, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to tap into your brain once again come in the near future.
Well, thanks, Tom. It's good to see you and talk with you, and give the support to all my Western New York friends there as you deal with yet another Western New York winter. My heart goes out to you, even though we've got a little 2 inches on the ground here in Santa Fe.
Oh my gosh. Well, that just makes me more and more anxious to get out there and visit you.
Come out, and on your way to Arizona to see some Grapefruit League baseball, stop by.
Can't be better. That can't be better. Can't be better than that. Thanks a lot, Jim. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. The Seagull will be screened on Saturday, February 11th at 1 p.m. Tickets are $15 for adults and $10 for students. Tickets can be purchased at www.fredopera.org online or by calling the box office at 716-679-1891. The Stage on Screen series is sponsored by Dr. James and Marcia Merrins. The Western New York Chamber Orchestra, or WYNCO, will be performing an unusual concert on February 19th at 4 p.m. in the King Concert Hall. It's a collaboration with progressive musicians online and others, and features guest soloists from around the world. I spoke with Mr. James Welch of Progressive Musicians, as well as Miss Lisa Layman, Executive Director of WYNCO, to discover how this collaboration came about. I'm pleased to be able to bring on to the podcast now to talk about the upcoming Western New York Chamber Orchestra concert, which will be taking place on Sunday, February 19th at 4 p.m. in the King Concert Hall at Rockefeller Art Center. Two artists who are responsible for organizing this concert. The first is Lisa Layman. She is on the voice faculty at SUNY Fredonia, and she is also the executive director of the Western New York Chamber Orchestra, which we will, from here on in, call WYNCO. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And the other person that I have on the line is Mr. James Welch. James is the founder, I think, of the Progressive Musicians up in Buffalo, and it has a website and does some interesting things. And James has also been a piano teacher at SUNY Fredonia and also an alum. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So let me start with you, Lisa, because WYNCO has, been around for a while, and it's done a lot of traditional things, and their concerts are usually very good. I know I participated in a couple of them myself, and they're always looking for some kind of angle. But this one is unique because it only came about a month ago. So tell us how this collaboration between you and Jim sort of got started.
Well, we'd have to go back a few years because Jim was one of my voice studio's major collaborative pianists with my students. And that's how we met ultimately. And of course, he's played numerous concerts with WYNCO over the years. And we're just goofy buddies and friends. We have a good laugh together, and we love to make music together. And we've done concerts together. That's very true. Jim Welch and Friends are recitals here that we used to do at Fredonia. So during, I would say, COVID probably is when Jim can speak to when progressive musicians really got started. But during COVID, when we were all sort of forced into this new technological challenge of how do we teach, how do we make music, how do we grasp what could be much more relevant to how we can manage a school of music through technology. Jim just jumped right in with both feet. He and Joanna Moffett, who is also an alumni, she's with Cole Orchestra. They started just doing live performances on the air, just amazing, like just hooking up the technology. So WYNCO got involved when Jim said, we're doing these competitions, international competitions online with live performances. In fact, I was an adjudicator for a couple of those events, all online, kind of fascinating. And the idea came up from them that they would hire the orchestra to basically give an opportunity to the winners of the concerto competition to play the actual concerto with a live orchestra rather than piano accompaniment or whatever, or solo, just, and it just kind of bloomed from there. The reason why we say it was basically about a month ago when it was sort of finalized. It's been in the creative process for a while. About a year, but getting the concerto winners judged and decided upon and all of that, and given the complexity of so many different countries being represented and different age groups being represented and technologies being represented, I would say that it's kind of surprising that we got this far this fast. It's much more their work than ours. Our work is coming. So, but I'm sure Jim can speak to some of those challenges way more so than I, because there's more than two groups involved here.
Well, let me then turn to Jim and Jim, let's talk to you about a little bit about how you started this Progressive Musicians and how it's grown from there, and then what this particular growth has meant to your collaboration with WYNCO.
Sure. So it's a somewhat funny story, but I got together with some friends, musician friends, and we were looking at competitions for our students and just adding up all the numbers of traveling and talking about how, it's like we've traveled the world, and it's like, even when we've won small prizes, it's like, at the end of the day, we still spent $5,000 traveling across the world, and then if we didn't win, we paid $5,000 to play for maybe 5 minutes, and we're just like, and not to knock that. I mean, that's the experience, that's the world. Everyone should be experiencing that if they're interested in being professional performers, but it's just so expensive and it's so exhausting, and we thought, what if we could do something like this online and still have judges and give them opportunities for growth and improvement, and then have a winners event or a celebration ceremony somewhere in person for selected musicians. Then only those people have to pay all that money to travel, and they're being featured. And so we put that together in the summer of 2019 is when we started doing that, and we got all the contracts in place, we got the website running, we did so much research, and it was crazy. And right around end of February of 2020, we were like, yes, let's launch this website, let's do this. And we launched it, and like maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, everything's shutting down.
Right.
There was that one moment where my business partner at the time said, what are we gonna do? We just invested all this money and all this time, and now everything's shut down. I was like, we're not going to do anything right now. We don't have to do anything different. We're online. And it was a bit of a happy accident in that way. I mean, I don't want to say COVID was happy, but I mean, right. we would have never predicted that, and that it did help us. And we were able to do all the auditions and go through the whole motions of it. And the only setback was that we had to delay the winners recital. It was supposed to be at the end of 2020, and we actually didn't get to it till February of 2022. But we did take 25 musicians to Carnegie Hall in February of 2022, and we had a grand recital, and it was a wonderful time. And so we went from there, and with this we have many different companies involved. We have Core Productions out of Chicago, as a Chicago-based opera company. Brilliant Talent Discovery Awards is just based out of Singapore. My company, Progressive Musicians, virtual concert halls, and stemming from virtual concert halls is also the Sound Espressivo competition. So it is essentially 5 different groups, in addition to WYNCO, that are making this thing happen. A clarinetist from Israel, 14 years old, I believe, and playing part of the Weber F minor concerto, and is just outstanding. And then only at Fredonia, we have 2 pianists, one from China, who's going to be playing the first movement of the Mozart D minor, and then another young professional from the US here, who is going to be playing the second movement of the Chopin E minor. Joining them, we have a cellist from Israel, 16 years old, playing the Saint-Saëns cello concerto. We have a violinist from Jersey, and he will be playing the first movement of the Mendelssohn E minor. And we have a professional guitarist playing the Vivaldi D major concerto. And it's just going to be a glorious program.
Now, how are the logistics for you, Lisa, as the executive director? I mean, putting all of this together with Maestro Cortese and getting rehearsal time and all of that kind of stuff. Has that made it more complicated than usual for you?
Yes, it has. It has, in that given that we're so used to sort of being in our own bubble here, right? We know who to call, when to call, to get it all set up. We're part of the university. In terms, I think a lot of people don't really know that WYNCO is the orchestra, the professional orchestra in residence here, and has been for many, many, many years. So we're built into the programming for the School of Music. We're usually the last ones that get scheduled, but that's okay. We figured out how to make it work. And we also are trying as an organization to broaden our reach. We all know, if we are a part of this Fredonia community, how extraordinary the opportunities are for going out to the School of Music and hearing something, just either at the Rockefeller or in the theater department or the dance department or the School of Music. It never ends. I think School of Music does over 350 performances a year, including recitals. Wow.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. I think the most complicated thing on our end is really juggling the musicians and getting them contracted properly for each gig. Luckily, I have a contractor who does all that good work for me. But I would say that the real challenge, as is always the case, is getting bottoms in seats at Fredonia when it comes to these things. And this is an opportunity to, first of all, let the orchestra spread its wings a bit, and also a chance for our School of Music students and the community at large to see the extraordinary talent that is out in the world, that is willing to travel, honestly, to us to be a part of. Our students could certainly participate in these competitions as well. There's no age limit. Jim, did you talk about that for this concert? The ages are extraordinary. I mean,
well, I actually was going to
ask.
I was going to ask Jim about that, because I noticed on the website there they range from age 7. I watched an audition from a young pianist that was like 7 years old, up until people who look apparently to be in at least their 60s or so.
Yeah. And of course, there's this all good messaging there, right? A student that might be really struggling with their identity just because they're not doing well in theory or piano or something, right? Can come and see, a very young person from another country who's dug deep and found that discipline and found that way to express themselves. Maybe it won't be for piano for this student. Maybe it's a voice student who's struggling with piano. But all of those opportunities for our students to step away from their screens and hear extremely beautiful, powerful classical music live. You cannot, I don't care how great your Bose stereo system is, it's not the same thing.
For you, Jim, I imagine that this has been, to a certain extent, a sort of a new frontier for you in terms of your career. It's a direction that you seem to be going full throttle with as a supplement to your usual gigs playing piano all over the region. Yes, it's been quite a career shift, mostly just in the last 6 months. But it's one of the goals that we had set forth that I really stand by is to make opportunities available for all musicians, mainly young, but young aspiring, but all musicians, professionals, adult, amateurs. If they want to have an opportunity to audition and learn something and make improvements, we're the place that wants to help make that happen. We're also the place that wants to reward those who have worked very hard and have hit milestones, including teachers too. Teachers never get enough recognition, and we do everything that we can to emphasize how much investment goes in from the studio teachers. I'm very fascinated by the whole concept because I really enjoy watching the technology be able to bring both to the young artists the opportunity to be able to be seen and exposed, as well as the opportunity for more audiences to be exposed to them, have more opportunity in that way, and also just extend the reach worldwide when we're talking about young performers from Israel and China coming to Fredonia to play out of all this. I think this collaboration is amazing. You two, it's just amazing.
I think it's going to become. I hope it's going to become. Maybe it won't be able to be an annual thing for a bit. Maybe, who knows? But it's the kind of it's an investment in our humanity, honestly. And it's time to, really get back to the thing we know everyone reaches for when they're needing some lift and some support. And it's always music, and it's always going to be music and the arts, because it takes us outside of our misery for a little bit or our worry for a little bit. And this is where I love the technology. The world could take a breath for an hour and a half or 2 hours and just be present with something extraordinary. Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and I want to express my appreciation to both of you for the time and effort you're putting into this extraordinary collaboration. It really sounds like something that's going to be quite special on the 19th. So thank you both for joining me and letting me know what you've been doing. Jim, out there in Buffalo, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for doing this, Tom.
Yeah, and Lisa, thank you for your time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Much
Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay. Thanks. The Western New York Chamber Orchestra International Artist Concerto Concert will be performed on Saturday, February 19th at 4 p.m. in the King Concert Hall. Tickets are $20 general admission and can be purchased online at www.fredonia.edu/tickets. or by calling the campus box office at 716-673-3501. This concert is also being performed in Buffalo on Friday, February 17th at 7:30 p.m. at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Buffalo, with a slightly different cast of soloists. Tickets for the Buffalo performance can be obtained by going to progressivemusicians.com and following the links for ticket purchases. Here is the arts calendar for the period of February 9th through 24th, 2023. The Lakeshore Center for the Arts will present the A.R. Gurney play Love Letters on February 10th through 12th, and also on Tuesday, February 14th. The performance on February 10th and 14th will be evening performances beginning at 7 p.m., while the weekend performances on February 11th and 12th will be matinees beginning at 2 p.m. Tickets are $20 for all performances and can be purchased online at lakeshorecenterforthearts.org. You can listen to the January 25th edition of the podcast for an interview with director Rick Mascaro for more information. On Friday, February 24th, the musical trio of Aaron Lipp, Chris Hollywood English, and Rick Robertson, all from the Rochester area, will bring their unique fusion sound of traditional bluegrass, Appalachian old-time music, and blues to the Opera House stage for a live concert. Tickets for this trio of young, innovative musicians range between $5 and $13 and are available online at www.fredopera.org or at the box office, 716-679-1891. The SUNY Fredonia School of Music, as always, has a whole host of events taking place. Notable among them are the Fredonia Choral Festival from February 11th through 12th, featuring a guest lecture by Dr. Karen Daly from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh on February 10th, and a concert with the 3 college choral ensembles and the Fredonia High School Chorus on February 12th. A masterclass by Fredonia grad Kyle Schoonhoven, tenor, on February 10th. A concert by Gaudete Brass, sponsored by Ethos Music, on February 12th. A concert by Factory Seconds Brass Tour on February 19th. And a concert with the Fredonia Wind Orchestra and Symphonic Winds on Wednesday, February 22nd. For detailed information on all these music events, go to events.fredonia.edu/music. Finally, the Visual Arts and New Media Faculty Arts Exhibit continues in the Marion Art Gallery until February 17th. Check out the January 11th edition of this podcast for more information on this exhibit. If you have a coming arts event and would like to get it mentioned on the arts calendar, please send an email to operahouse@fredopera.org or call the box office at 716-679-1891 with your information. Last but not least, the cinema series continues with 2 movies, A Man Called Otto, featuring Tom Hanks, and The Whale, featuring Oscar-nominated Brendan Fraiser as Charlie. Our resident movie expert, Mr. Paul Preston from The Movie Guys, joins me once again to preview these 2 offerings. Now, all right, everybody, it's movie time, and you know what that means. We have Paul Preston from The Movie Guys here to talk about a couple of movies coming on the cinema series scene. As always, welcome, Paul.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, Tom. Award season.
Award season, yes, indeed.
A blessing and a curse, really, because Hollywood is so skittish about making sure that the award voters have, this short attention span, that they put all the movies out at the end of the year. And
Right.
So it's really an awards movie dump. They're all great. And like the best movies of the year are finally coming out. But you got like a month and a half to see 40 movies. So you know what they're talking about when they hand out the Academy Awards.
Yes.
But that being said, there's like 40 great movies. At least one's worth giving your time to out there now. But spread it out, guys. Spread it out a little bit. Before we were recording, we were talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. At least that came out back in March, I think, last year. Testament to how good that movie is. We're still talking about it. So sometimes your movie's that good, Top Gun Maverick even, where we're talking about it late in the year. But today we're talking about a couple of late 2022 films that are just getting out to Fredonia.
Yep. And let's take them in order that they're coming, because on the we're going to start off with A Man Called Otto. It's a Tom Hanks vehicle. It's going to be playing at the Opera House on February 11th and 14th. And so let's talk about that one. I mean, I called it a Tom Hanks vehicle, but lately Tom Hanks seems to be picking all these movies that, prominently, he's prominently featured in, and there's interesting vehicles for him.
Yes, I say if Tom Hanks is making a movie and you're sharing the earth with him, same with Meryl Streep, you should go see what he's doing. I still haven't seen Pinocchio. I hear it's terrible, but the reviews were so terrible, even that shied me away from my theory that you should see everything he's doing. Then again, I bet he's great. Anyway, this one, he's right up front and center. So yes, you should go and see it. And I appreciate this podcast, Tom, because it often gives me the nudge to see some films I wasn't going to see or hadn't yet. And I hadn't yet seen A Man Called Otto until you were like, come on the show. So I went out and I checked it out. What's that? The Phantom of the Open we talked about a few podcasts
The Phantom of the Open. Yes, we did.
Mark
Yeah.
Rylance. I had never even heard of that. There was one where you nudged me. I'm like, this movie is awesome. And I hope that if you didn't go to the Opera House, you still seek it out. Like, I don't think anybody in the States saw it. Really, it's a British film, but about a guy who stinks at golf and ends up going to the British Open and continues to stink, and it's just a great story. But as far as A Man Called Otto goes, bigger movie, bigger star. So I saw the trailer a million times, and it looked a little rudimentary. An old white guy lives in a private road and has his angry routine, taking the recyclables and putting them where they go, where people screwed up where they put them, and he's checking the parking passes on the restricted parking street and making sure they're all in place or he'll raise a fuss. And eventually this Latino couple moves across the street. And if you think this plucky younger couple is going to bring a smile to the angry guy's face, how did you guess that?
Intuition, Paul, intuition.
But good news, there's much more going on here. And it looks like from the trailer, Otto's going to go from one comedic moment to another, being adorably grumpy. But what they don't tell you in the trailer, and it's not a spoiler because it happens early in the film that they announce what he's going to do. He lost his wife to cancer, and they kind of show in the trailer goofy culture clash antics, but Otto wants to kill himself. And this, but he'll be damned if one of the nuts in the neighborhood, the lady walking a little yip dog, or the person who parks their bike in the wrong place, happens to be trans, you name it. They keep interrupting his plans. So this is different in how it plays out, and it grounds the whole film in more reality than the trailer would let on. So first I wanted to make that. So if you've seen the trailer and you're like, yeah, it looks pleasant, there's more going on, and that's to the film's benefit. And it's a risky move making Tom Hanks grumpy, removing all the charm we love from Tom Hanks. Does it work here? Well, you have to remember, Tom Hanks can play anything. So he's great in this. Just don't forget that little nugget.
Okay.
Also worth bringing up, though, Mariana Trevino, who I've never heard of, plays Marisol, the wife of the couple that moves in across the street from him. Mm-hmm. She's a joy and does a lot of great reacting to Hanks's monologues, which is can be hard to do if you feel like you're not doing much, but she's really, really good. Mm-hmm. And there are flashback scenes about how Otto met his wife, and his real life son Truman is good in those scenes playing young Otto. So you buy the casting at least, right?
Right.
And there's a girl named Rachel Keller who plays his wife Sonia. And I don't know if you ever saw The Notebook, but it's one of those sappy romances. But Rachel McAdams is in it. And if you don't fall in love with Rachel McAdams in that movie, you have no soul. And I think Rachel Keller is very on the same lines in this film. If you watch Otto fall in love with her and you're like, I get it. Mm-hmm. So that's fun too. And I'd have never heard of her before. She's a real find. And you read the book this is based on, right, Tom?
I did. I read the book. The movie is based on the book by a Swedish author by the name of Fredrik Backman, and it's originally called A Man Called Ivey. And they also made a Swedish version of that novel as well, called A Man Called Ivey. So this is actually the second film adaptation of that novel. It's a very popular novel, as a matter of fact. It hit the New York Times bestseller list. It was, on everybody's read list back in the day.
Well, I get it. It's a genuinely likable story. You can't not sitting there going, I'm invested in this. The characters are fun, throw in Hanks, and this is it's corny here and there, but like I said, deeper than the trailer lets on. Some of the music is a little, it's like pleasant, and it's like, okay, well,
Yes.
I can get into this mood without that, but it's Hanks, and again, you should see everything he's doing. And if you're worried, oh, is the book better? Yes. Even as a movie guy, I will tell you the book is always better. If you read a book in 2 hours, you wouldn't enjoy it. So
correct.
So I just give that concession over to book. That's also, Tom, well, I can't read any books. Come on, I can't have the movie be bad.
No, that's true. That's true.
So this is definitely a checkout. It's easy to like, very enjoyable, and it didn't quite find the audience it should have. Again, mired in the glut of films that came out at the end of the year, and Avatar, of course, walking away with everything there was to be had box office wise. So worth checking out at the Opera House.
This was, I thought when I looked at Tom Hanks on the poster, I said, boy, if Walter Matthau was alive, this was a perfect Walter Matthau vehicle.
Absolutely.
Well, so, for the audience out there that's a little bit older and maybe knows Walter Matthau's work, they'll understand why I say that if they go see the movie. And we have another offering, of course, coming up as well the following weekend. That's February 18th and 21st, and it's called The Whale. And Brendan Fraiser, who plays the title character, I guess the way you could talk about it, is up for an Academy Award for Best Actor in this really kind of rather stunning and somewhat controversial role that he took on.
All true. The awards love is real for a guy who's never had any. So it's quite astonishing to watch. We're, again, talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think Ke Huy Quan, who is pretty much, he was a lock for an Oscar nomination. I think he's the front runner to win. He and Fraiser both are having this awards run that's never been in their presence before. That's really fun to watch. And now the film, not fun to watch, but pretty astonishing. And Fraiser plays this 500-pound man. I don't think they mentioned his weight, but he's got to be around there. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to connect with his daughter. His name is Charlie. And if I hadn't said it before, the best thing relationships can be in a movie is complicated. And this is that. There are equal parts sympathy and shame generated for Charlie in the film as various people visit him over the course of the week. There's a young missionary who sees that Charlie's health is put him in his last days, and he wants to save his soul. And then complicating things with Charlie's plan to reconnect with his daughter is that the daughter is outwardly the worst kind of teen. She's punchy, phone addicted, bitter, but justifiably bitter. Charlie abandoned her 8 years ago. Why? The answer is complicated. So again, hopefully that should be enough to get you to want to see this movie. So without spoilers, let me say there's a lot going on here, enough to keep the viewers and myself involved throughout, engaged, excited, an emotional roller coaster. And Fraiser's great. The other performers worth mentioning, Sadie Sink plays his daughter. She's on Stranger Things, and they actually ask a lot of her on that show. She plays Max, who went through a lot last season. Her brother died, and she gets possessed and all this crazy stuff you would find on that show. But can she go beyond just the, pop culture world of Stranger Things? Yes, she's very good in this. And you have Hong Chow, who was just in The Menu, which we talked about on our last show. Mm-hmm. She continues to show that she has range, also very good. And the makeup is incredible. If you've seen even stills of this makeup job they did to make Brendan Fraiser a 500-pound guy, it's an ingenious combo of the makeup and Fraiser's performance that leave you with no doubt that Charlie is who he is and the story is happening to him. That's really what we don't talk about enough with acting. Did you buy that he's this guy and this is happening to him? As the actor, you have to. And I think the combination of effects and the acting really pull this off stunningly. Movie magic, Tom.
Movie magic. Well, that's an interesting point you bring up because I think I read somewhere that the prosthetics for him were 300 pounds themselves, and he also took like lessons from a dance instructor as to how someone who weighed 500, 600 pounds would actually move in something like that. So my question to you is that the movie has stirred a bit of controversy because some people say they should have found a fat person to play the role as opposed to Brendan Fraiser, and so that there's this controversy, and it happens a lot these days where people are saying, well, the actor can't play that role because they're not that particular gender or type or whatever. And what's your thoughts about that?
Well, it reminds me of What's Eating Gilbert Grape, 1993 Johnny Depp film with Leonardo DiCaprio in an Oscar-nominated role. And Darlene Cates, I think I got the name right, played Gilbert Grape's 500-pound mother, and she never left the house, and there was another complicated relationship there. But she was great at that part. Boy, I don't know what to tell you about that. I think the best performer wins, right? I mean, it's just if your film is at stake, and if Brendan Fraser's great, you go with him, and if you can pull it off, where you're not looking hacky, and this certainly does not look hacky, and the reviews have been mixed, even though everyone seems to like Fraser's performance, and that's got to be not just maybe what you're talking about, but the caustic dialogue and potential weight shaming that the movie has. But it's not like it was ever inauthentic. I'd rather not have my high drama award season picture be safe and rote. This is not that. I think people might say this isn't helping the cause of people who are dealing with weight shaming in America, but I don't think movies or art need a cause. Tell me if you agree with this. Now, they need the truth.
I do agree with that.
There's never a cause in real life, in relationships and interactions. There's only the truth. And so the movie brings that. Darren Aronofsky's your director here too. And so if you're wondering everything we're talking about, it sounds provocative. Well, this should seal the deal for you that yes, it is. He made Black Swan. He made Requiem for a Dream. He made The Wrestler. He made Noah, The Fountain. Like everything he touches is some provocative piece. And but you're always rewarded for it, I think, as the viewer. And I'll say one more thing that's I've said a lot of great things. I should always say something in the alternate vein as well. This is based on a play, one you haven't heard of, right? The Whale.
I have not heard The Whale, no, and it received apparently an off Broadway performance after premiering at the Denver Center in Colorado.
I'd be curious to see if what kind of actor they hired there. And what kind of makeup they may have used. And I'm curious to see how the play ends, given that the film went a cinematic direction in its finale that you couldn't pull off on stage. I'd be curious to see. But it does get a little claustrophobic. Maybe that's effective in here, but I did think with the film you could expand the story, like you could, and do a little more. So some of the conventions of characters popping up seems a little it's interesting that they should pop up right now, but if you're on stage, that's the only place they can pop, right? So They have to show up there. So that was a little interesting to see it adapted to the screen like that. But it did remind me of One Night in Miami, which was one of my favorite films from a few years ago, which is also based on a play. And whatever I said doesn't matter. The acting wins. And so that happens here. And How do you even compare this to Colin Farrell's performance in The Banshees of Inisherin, which is a brilliant film and a masterful performance? They're so different,
Yes. Well,
Fraser's bogged down with all this stuff he's got to act through, and he's got these powerful and, high emotion relationships. And Farrell is so subdued and small, and yet has to be big occasionally. And they're just so navigated differently. I mean, you shouldn't even give Best Actor unless everyone plays the same part. Then you can tell who's the best actor. But we're in the situation we're in. So certainly Farrell and Fraser, and perhaps Austin Butler, who played Elvis, which is not a good movie. I know what I just said about Tom Hanks, but he's great. But there's your actor trio going for the role, or going for the award right there. It's going to be one of those guys.
Well, I'm going to have to leave it there, Paul. I'd like to get into it a little bit more, but time is what it is. So thanks again, as always, for coming on the podcast. When we have more movies from the cinema series, of course, I'll always give you a call. And thanks for your time and effort. Much appreciated.
Movies.
Yes, movies. Stay warm out there in beautiful downtown Burbank. Take it easy. The cinema series is always presented on Saturdays and then again the following Tuesdays, with screenings beginning at 7:30 p.m. both days. A Man Called Otto will be screened on February 11th and 14th, while The Whale will be presented on February 18th and 21st. Tickets are $7 general admission, $6.50 for Opera House members, and $5 for students. Tickets are sold at the door only on the night of the screening. And that's it for this midwinter edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat. My thanks to Dr. Jim Ivey, Mr. James Welch, Ms. Lisa Layman, and Mr. Movie Guy Paul Preston for being my guests on this episode. Notes from the Aisle Seat is a production of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House in Fredonia, New York. For more information on any of the Opera House's events, call the box office at 716-679-1891, visit the website at www.fredopera.org, or email at operahouse@fredopera.org. Notes from the Aisle Seat is now available wherever you get your podcasts and also on the Opera House YouTube channel. If you like this podcast, please consider following us by clicking the follow button on our home website at aisleseat.podbean.com and spreading the word through your social media feeds. If you have an arts event you'd like featured on the podcast, why don't you drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org and we'll see about featuring your event. Please try to give us a month's advance notice if possible to facilitate timely scheduling. If you have any suggestions, comments, or criticisms of the podcast, just drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org. We'll be glad to receive your feedback. Our next episode will be available on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. I'm Tom Laughlin, and until then, be safe out there and be kind to one another.